So the first thing I did is I made myself a new template. This new template is called Teapot. I've decided that this would be a good size for, let's say, a teapot body. My plan is to expand this out though. So I am going to push from the inside and give this form volume as well, which I did on that one. So I took it to slab, same way of rolling the slab. I'm keeping this soft though. Line this up and cut it pretty well. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect because once I start putting on any texture, it's going to start expanding out. So I am going to have to do a refining cut. So anyway, we have lots of different textures. I grabbed this one, I put all the textures over there. We're going to try and do the same thing when it comes to keeping things clean. These can just go into a bleach bath as well as most of the other stamps. These are Visc-fired stamps, so these can just go into a bleach bath as well. But the other thing is that if you really do like, other than these, if you like one of these textures and you want to continue using it or you haven't finished it, using it, like let's say I might want to texture the handle of my teapot with this same texture, maybe don't put this back into the bin. Put this with your stuff and wrap it up because you'll never find it again. I ask that if you do go through all that stuff to put it back into the container so I don't have to clean it up. So I have this one slab. I'm just going to take this one texture and roll it on the form. We used to have a handle that went on this, but it broke. But this works just as fine. Me printing it. And I could go back if I need to. See how much it expanded it? It expanded it a good amount. And I can go back and refine trim. I did refine both sides of this slab from any kind of canvas texture before I started doing this. Now I need to go back and do the very fun bevel edge cut to both sides. So I'm going to start on this side and I'm going to bevel edge cut here. Now the tricky thing is that this needs to come up, off, be laid down on its reverse side, and bevel edge cut this way. I'm going to pick up the form, and you can see by the way the bevel edge cuts were done that that's going to now line up. That's why you have to do that reversing of the slab. I still, even though it's soft slab, I want to do some scoring, and I really don't use slip. I use just water, and the water mixed with the wet clay really does kind of make my own slip. So this is different than in building hard slab where you really do need to use slip. So I'm going to line up those two edges and lightly push that together. Again, a bevel edge cut, that's going to help avoid a very thick area where two slabs would just hit each other and overlap, or, which would be really bad, is to just put them together like this. So this allows an even thickness throughout. Some students get a little bit upset about the texture being distorted. One way of alleviating that is to not use a texture like this, but to use a texture like this, where it's a repeating pattern, where I could then stamp right directly over that seam and erase it. But with this, it's a round pattern, so I can't really get the same pattern back. But I can mostly make it disappear. And I'm just going to make sure this kind of gets round. I do want to do a small reinforced coil on the interior. A good tool to use to blend the interior is the back of this tool. So I'll take this and just kind of blend that in. Remember, you can always go like this as well and blend in the other side. But I do want to do a small reinforced coil, really small, teeny tiny. And again, use the back of that tool to blend that in. Really want to make sure, especially if I want to expand this form, that that seam is connected well. If I don't, the likelihood is that the seam will separate and open when I start trying to expand it. So it really is an odd thing, but wetting down this tool and allowing that to blend really does help. And I also will make sure that's nice and blended. All right. So, I mean, you really can't see on the inside. I don't know if you can. You can't really see any kind of line. It's nice and blended. Things look good. So let's say I just want to put this on a flat base. Pretty simple. What I do, take a slab, make sure this fits on it, whichever side I choose. Score this. I can't even decide to be like, well, you know, I want this texture on the underneath of that interior slab. So when somebody lifts up the piece, they'll see this nice texture on it. Making sure all my canvas texture is erased. I really don't need to score that. And again, it's about getting that to kind of lock in place. I can always refine cut this more later. I'm just trying to get this roughed in. I do still want to use a reinforced coil on the interior. I know this is tough for some people to reach into, so what I'll do usually is I'll lay the coil in to the interior. I'll blend it as well as I can with my fingers. And then what I like to do is I like to take a damp paintbrush, and that is how I blend in that interior coil. It really smooths things out. This is a stiffer bristle brush, a really soft bristle brush. Really won't do it. So again, you know, we talk about things like craftsmanship. So this would be something involving craftsmanship. How well is that coil blended? How clean is the interior surface? How welcoming is it to use it if it was a mug? All right, remember as well, if you really do want to make functional cups, remember how much things shrink, okay? I mean, these are pretty functional still, but I mean, they might be a little small for some people. You may also want to consider, when you're making your mugs, to thin out your slab. So this slab roller is set to roll a certain thickness. For some of you, those are going to be weighty mugs, pretty heavy. You can always go back with a rolling pin and roll them out a little bit thinner to get it to be a little lighter. The thinner the slab is, though, the harder it is to build well. It's going to get more floppy, it's going to get more prone to slumping in certain areas, and your connection needs to be done very well. All right, so everything's pretty much connected. What I like to do now is that if I want to expand this, I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to take my hand, I'm going to kind of dampen my hand, and I'm going to think about as well the form that I want to make. I really don't want it super wide here. If anything, I want this to kind of come in a little bit. I want this to be more of the widest point, so I'm going to think about that as I'm shaping using my inside hand. And I'm going to just make sure that I'm holding and keeping a steadiness here. A lot of students will kind of freak out thinking that these little things that are appearing are cracks. They're not. If they're not all the way through, they're not cracking. It's your clay body, it's the way it's responding, it's the way the texture is on there. Unless if it's going all the way through, it's not a crack. So my major expansion point is going to be in that middle section. Now I am getting the shape to be fluid to that widest section. I'm being careful at the seam. So this will take some time to get this form even, symmetrical, volume-wise. Now let's say I wanted to bring this neck inward. There is a process called darting. If anyone's familiar with sewing, that's how you would bring the waist in of a dress or anything like that. And how you do that is by cutting darts out of the fabric and bringing it together. So I could decide I'm going to take a dart here. All right, and score this.